I was born, my name was Patricia Ann Cox. I was the second to the last. Leela was born in August of 1919. Bill was born in December of 1920. Alma was born in February of 21. I might have that wrong. Clinton, he was born in 1924 in November. We always called him Scotty. Myrna was born in 1926 on the 30th of August. I was born on the 19th of August in 1929, and Norman was born on the 11th of October in 1932. Well, I was born during harvest, so that kind of left out any birthday parties or anything through the years. My parents were born, both of them were, one of them was born west of Kendrick and the other one was born east of Kendrick. And they both lived there until they were married in 1919 on the 19th of January. Mom's maiden name was Wilson, and Dad's, of course, Dad was a Cox. We were about 9 miles out of town. My dad was a farmer and was raised on a farm and a dairy ranch. His dad brought his Ayrshire cattle from Nova Scotia with him when he moved to Idaho. And that was all that was ever raised on that ranch until as long as the dairy herd was there. When we went to the country school in Kendrick, in the wintertime there was always so much snow, and my dad had a big bobsled pulled with 6 horses, and we'd always put the jingle bells on the horses, and we would sing jingle bells all the way to school and all the way home, because he'd come after us because the snow was too deep to walk in. And we had about 2.5 miles to go, but he would take all the neighbors' kids that was along the way too when we would go to school and come home. When I was a child growing up, we didn't have electricity. We had real candles on our Christmas tree, and they would all get lit, but you had to be very careful where they were placed so they didn't ignite the branch above them. There was no indoor plumbing, and as long as I was a child at home, even after we moved to Ferdinand, we didn't have indoor plumbing. I went to school on American Ridge in a country school that had all 8 grades in one room, and until I was in the 4th grade. And then in 1939, my folks bought a ranch at Ferdinand, and we moved to Ferdinand in October of 1939, and I went to school at the St. Maurice School through the 8th grade, and then I went to school, the high school, till I graduated in 1948. Well, most all of my classmates were really good friends. And the Ullorn kids were good friends. The Fry kids were good friends. And the Walt Kinzer's kids were very good friends. One of them was Sylvia Forsman. She was just a year ahead of me in school. And Bernice Now, a daughter of Albert Now's. And That one, I guess, was the main ones. I worked for different ranchers on the prairie for up until the time that Leo and I were married. I worked at the Twin Gables in Ferdinand my last year of school in high school, and him and Richard Cashmere, a cousin, would come over there for lunch and supper a lot of times, and that was where I first met him. Then when I went to work for the McDonald Ranch, he worked for his brother George out there off and on when George needed extra help, and I got better acquainted with him, but he was always just a big brother to me. It was never somebody that I thought I would ever marry, but it turned out that that was the only one that I ever cared for enough to get married. Oh, we dated off and on for probably 2 years before we ever really went steady, mostly to movies. And where I was a convert to the Catholic Church, he would go with me to my, when I would go to have my classes with the priest, and he enjoyed that because he only got to go to catechism on Saturday mornings when he was growing up, and so he learned a lot along with me. And then I went to work for Carl and Josephine Meyer and doing housework, and worked there through the summer months. And that fall I went to work for Earl McDonald's and worked there until Leo and I were married in 1951 in January. I was 21 when I was married. He was 25. We were married in the Catholic Church in Grangeville. Well, we went from, after we had our pictures taken at the church, we went to Carl Meyer's house for breakfast because at that time you couldn't eat before you went to Mass and received communion. So Josephine Meyer had cream chicken on biscuits for us for breakfast that morning, and the wedding party went out there and we ate there. And then we went from that house over to Leo's Uncle Joe and Aunt Anna Cashmere's for our wedding reception. And that only lasted a couple of hours and was not very many people there, because when you had it in the home, you couldn't have too many people. And then Leo and I left to go on our honeymoon, and we had to go down to his brother's place to pick up his suitcase. And we went on down the Harpster Grade and down the river, and it had been raining and all winter instead of snowing, and we had to stop and wait for him to clean out 2 slides before we could get on through to Lewiston. And we stayed in Lewiston that night, and then went on to Seattle the next day to visit my sister for a week. Our first house was in Grangeville, right on Main Street, across from where Asker's grocery store is now. And then we bought a house up on the East Hill, and we lived there from April until September, when we moved out past Tolo Lake. Leo Jr. was born when we were just a month before we left Rangeville. And then we had 14 months later was Clinton Jerome. 2 years later was Donald Allen. And 2 years later after that was Mary Ann. And she was the last one born out there. And when we moved up here in 1957, then Roger was born in 1959 in June. And then we had a little girl that was stillborn. Her name was Margaret Mary, was what we had named her. When she was stillborn, we had an autopsy done, and there was no reason why she shouldn't have lived. So we don't know what happened. We just weren't supposed to have her. But other than that, all of our children were really very healthy. And then we had, Tanya was born in July of 1968. The holidays was always a lot of fun. And so was Easter, because we'd always try to have a Easter egg hunt for them unless it was snowing. And but the Christmas was the main holiday for us. But we always made all the holidays. I mean, Thanksgiving was a big one, and Christmas, and then we'd have Easter and the 4th of July. When the kids were little, we'd take them to the rodeo, but that kind of got to be too much money, too much with that many kids to take, so, and I didn't like to have to try and watch all of them either. I have 15 grandchildren, but we lost one in the war in Iraq, and that was Donnie's son, Abe. And he was born here, or buried here in Cottonwood. I have quite a few great-grandchildren. With the baby Africans and the bigger grown-up Africans, for all the kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, and some friends, I've got pretty close to 100 Africans that I crocheted. Of course, some of them are just small ones and other ones are bigger ones. Well, a woman is the only one that can multitask, so, because trying to keep two houses, the one we lived in, and then keep the other one clean too so you could work in it, was quite a chore. We built on it for right at 2 years. We moved in before it was completely finished, and everybody told me that I'd never get it finished, and we did, because Leo wasn't one to leave something undone. I put in all the insulation on the main floor, and I put in all the backing to the sheetrock. We put plyboard behind the sheetrock because I'd seen too many holes where kids' heads had gone through sheetrock, and I didn't want to have to be patching sheetrock all the time, so we put the backing to it. And I put all those in. I put all the plug-ins, all the light switches where I wanted them, and then the electrician come in and run the wires to them where they went, and it all worked out just fine. Well, we didn't stay in bed till 7 o'clock in the morning. We always were up by 5 o'clock, and I had my work all done by the time the kids would get up, and then to take care of their dishes and stuff didn't take too long, and that was how I got so much accomplished. Oh, I don't remember what years I started, but I drove grain truck for 22 years for him and his brother because they farmed together. And then during harvest, they would harvest together even after they split up their partnership. Then when he had to quit farming because of his health, he took on a job of crop adjusting throughout the Northwest, and we went to fall calving, and because I wasn't going to go out and check cows in the February and March and miss something that I didn't know what to do with, and we fall calved, and I would stay home during the fall from August till he would get through, and usually in November. I had a long day, and a lot of nights was way late getting getting stuff done up. In fact, in 1954, we had a wet harvest, and I was doing supper dishes at midnight and getting breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning when it was dry enough that they could harvest. I grew up on a ranch, and I helped my dad during the war when the boys were gone, and I had to milk and take care of calves and stuff then too. Oh yeah, the kids were always good help. After they got old enough to do things, otherwise they had to help in the house while I was outside. Well, I didn't have very good ground to raise a garden on, but the dobe out past Tolo Lake was too heavy, and when we moved to Cottonwood here, the place we got had too much rock, so it was only things that I could grow on top of the ground. Nothing that I planted like carrots or anything would even grow. All around the house I had flowers, and around the edge of the yard. And after we built our house, I had the sidewalks all lined with different kind of flowers. One area was just mainly for petunias, and the rest of them was multi-flowers. And the back side of the house had different kinds of flowers and all around the edge of it. My husband Leo passed away on the 21st of October in 2004. We'd done a lot of traveling between here and Missoula because that was where he went to the cancer doctor before he died, and we would make probably 4 or 5 trips a year over to Missoula and back. And in the wintertime it got to be pretty scary because of the icy roads along the river and everything. Well, his mother had died with cancer, and he always said that they would all die with cancer. And when he finally knew something was wrong with his kidneys and nobody around here could find out what was, he even went to Spokane, and the doctor they sent him to up there didn't know what it was. So I finally talked him into going to Missoula for his lung problem, which he had to quit farming for because of the dust. And I was going to take him over there for that, and then at the same time, the doctor that took care of his lungs found out what was his cancer, and they sent him to a specialist there, and they removed one kidney in 1988, 2 days before Thanksgiving that year. And then he went for several years with no problems, and then finally it took over the prostate. Did I say that right? And then finally it got the other kidney, and that was what took his life. And after he had died, why, I turned the farm over to the boys, or to all the kids, really. Always be truthful with one another, no matter who it is, because once you aren't, why, then you've got 2 or 3 different problems you've got to iron out. I'd always go to my mother for advice, and she usually was always pretty truthful with me too.
What do you want your kids and everybody to remember you like?
As a good grandmother and mother. One thing, I never did feel I would live long enough to be as helpless as I am now.
Well, you helped us a lot. We can help you.
Sounds like you got some good kids to help you at least.
I do have very good kids.